My name is Karen Mitchell, 35 years old, living in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm in real estate, but you wouldn't know it from the modest apartment I call home. Last Sunday, at a family dinner in the suburbs, my mom couldn't stop raving about my older brother's new 4-bedroom mansion. It's got a pool, marble countertops, the works. She bragged, her voice dripping with pride. My brother sat there smirking while his wife chimed in about their custom chandeliers. I stayed quiet, picking at my plate, used to being overlooked. Then Mom turned to me, her tone syrupy but sharp. Karen, wouldn't you love to stay at their place? Your apartment's so cozy. The table snickered, but my aunt's eyes met mine, silently urging me on. I set down my fork, leaned forward, and said calmly, "Thanks, Mom, but I own 2 houses next door and one across from that mansion. Which one do you want to crash at?" The room froze. No one spoke. That moment changed everything, and I was just getting started. If you've ever had to prove your family wrong, drop your story in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe for more real family drama. Growing up in the suburbs of Sioux Falls, my family looked like any other middle-class household. Kids rode bikes down our street and neighbors swapped small talk over picket fences. But inside our home, things were different. My mom had a favorite, and it wasn't me. My older brother Gregory was 38 when I hit 35, but even as kids, Mom treated him like he walked on water. I'd come home with straight A's or a science fair ribbon, and she'd barely look up. "That's nice, Karen," she'd say, then turn to Gregory, her face lighting up. "You made team captain for basketball, Gregory. I'm so proud." His team lost every game that season, but to Mom, he was a star. I remember one spring spending weeks on a model rocket for a school competition. I poured my heart into it, gluing every piece with care. It won first place, and I ran home clutching the blue ribbon. Mom was helping Gregory with his math homework, fractions again. "We'll check it out later," she said, eyes fixed on his notebook. Later never happened. But when Gregory scored 1 basket in a blowout loss, Mom clapped like he'd won the championship. I stood there, ribbon in hand, feeling invisible. It wasn't just school. I joined the debate team in middle school, practicing arguments until my voice was hoarse. I won regionals, got my picture in the Sioux Falls paper. Mom didn't show up. But when Gregory got a C in history, she baked a cake to celebrate his effort. I'd lie awake at night, replaying those slights, wondering why my best was never enough. It wasn't about praise. It was about belonging in my own family. Dad tried to make up for it. He'd see me go quiet, take me to the park, and push me on the swings. "You're gonna do big things, Karen," he'd say, his voice steady but low, like he didn't want Mom to hear. He never stood up to her, though. When she went on about Gregory's potential, Dad's mouth would tighten, but he'd stay silent, keeping the peace. I wished he'd say something, anything, to make her see me. One summer, I built a birdhouse for a woodworking class. It was simple, but I carved my initials into the wood, proud of every nail I drove straight. I showed it to Mom, hoping for a spark of interest. She glanced up from her magazine. "That's cute," she said, then went back to reading. The next day, Gregory broke his skateboard trying some stunt. Mom spent hours comforting him, promising a new one. My birdhouse sat on my shelf, forgotten. Aunt Beatrice, Dad's sister, was different. She'd visit during holidays, bringing me books on architecture or astronomy. "Keep going, kid," she'd whisper, squeezing my shoulder. "You're special." Once, when I was about 12, she saw me sulking after Mom praised Gregory for tying his shoes right. She pulled me aside, handed me a journal, and said, "Write your dreams here. They're yours, not hers." That journal became my sanctuary, where I sketched plans for a future no one could ignore. High school was my turning point. I stopped chasing Mom's approval. I dove into every project, every club, determined to carve my own path. I read about real estate, fascinated by how people turned smart investments into empires. It wasn't just about money. It was about building something solid, something Mom couldn't dismiss. Every time she bragged about Gregory fixing his bike or joining a school play, I'd think about the houses I'd own one day. I wasn't just competing with him, I was out to outshine everyone's expectations. There was this one moment that stuck with me. In 10th grade, I organized a school fundraiser for a local charity. We raised enough to buy books for kids in need, and the principal called me to the stage to thank me. I looked out hoping to see Mom in the crowd. She wasn't there. Gregory had a soccer practice that day, and she was cheering him on even though he spent most games on the bench. I gripped the microphone, smiled, and promised myself I'd never let her indifference hold me back. Looking back, I don't think Mom meant to push me away. Maybe she thought Gregory needed her more, or maybe she saw her younger self in him. But it didn't matter. The constant comparison, the way she brushed off my achievements, it built a fire in me. I wasn't just going to succeed. I was going to make them all see what they'd missed. And I'd do it without her applause, on my own terms. After leaving home for college, I started my own journey. I earned a full scholarship to the University of South Dakota, studying business with a focus on real estate. My professors saw potential in me, assigning me to lead group projects and praising my knack for numbers. By my junior year, I was interning at a local real estate firm, learning how to spot undervalued properties and flip them for profit. It felt like solving a puzzle. Every deal was a challenge I could conquer. After graduation, I didn't rush back to Sioux Falls. I stayed in Vermilion, working for that firm, saving every penny I could. My first big move was buying a small duplex at 23, fixing it up and renting it out. The rental income gave me a taste of what was possible. Over the next few years, I bought more properties, a condo here, a townhouse there, each one chosen with care. By my late 20s, I owned half a dozen properties, including 3 single-family homes in Sioux Falls's most upscale neighborhood, right near the kind of mansion Gregory and his wife would later brag about. Those 3 houses alone were worth over $2 million, but I kept that quiet. I didn't tell my family about my success. Mom and Dad had poured money into Gregory's wedding, a lavish affair with a live band and a venue that screamed excess. They even helped him and his wife buy their first house, a flashy 4-bedroom with a view. I got a card in the mail with a $50 check and a note, "Congrats on graduating, Karen." That was it. I wasn't surprised, but it cemented my decision to keep my wins to myself. Why give them a chance to compare me to Gregory or dismiss what I'd built? Instead, I lived simply, renting a modest 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Sioux Falls. My tenants paid my bills and my bank account grew quietly. I drove a used sedan, shopped at regular stores, and avoided flashy purchases. When Mom called to check in, she'd ask about my little job, and then pivot to Gregory's latest promotion or their new car. I'd smile through the phone, say, "That's great," and change the subject. It wasn't worth correcting her. My success wasn't for her approval. It was for me. Tina, my best friend from college, was one of the few who knew the truth. She was a freelance journalist, always chasing stories about local entrepreneurs. One night over coffee, she stumbled across my name in a property records database. "Karen, you own what?" she said, her eyes wide. "3 houses in that neighborhood. You're sitting on a gold mine." I laughed it off, but she pushed me. "Why hide it? You're killing it. Own that success." I shrugged, stirring my coffee. "It's not about them knowing. It's about me knowing." Tina shook her head but didn't press further. She respected my choice, even if she thought I should shout it from the rooftops. Meanwhile, Gregory and his wife leaned into their showy lifestyle. They'd post pictures of their vacations, their designer clothes, their oversized SUV. Mom would forward me those posts, gushing about how well they were doing. I'd scroll past, unimpressed. I knew the math. Their spending didn't add up. A friend in finance mentioned Gregory had taken out a second mortgage to keep up appearances. I didn't say a word. Let them think they were winning. My properties were generating steady cash flow, and I was already eyeing my next investment, a commercial lot downtown. What drove me wasn't just the money. It was the control, the independence, the proof that I didn't need anyone's validation. Every deal I closed was a reminder of what I could do, despite Mom's indifference or Gregory's shadow. I'd walk through my properties sometimes, checking repairs or meeting tenants, and feel a quiet pride. These weren't just houses. They were my empire built brick by brick without a single handout. I never let myself forget why I started. Growing up, I'd been the kid Mom overlooked, the one whose trophies didn't matter. Now I was the woman who owned half the block where Gregory's mansion stood. I kept that secret close, not out of shame, but strategy. One day I'd show them, not to boast, but to make them see what they'd missed. Until then, I worked, I planned, and I waited. Last Sunday, I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs of Sioux Falls. It was one of those family dinners Mom insisted on, the kind where everyone pretends to get along. I walked in, greeted by the smell of her signature roast, and took my seat at the table. Mom was already in full swing, raving about Gregory and his wife's new mansion. "It's got a heated pool, Karen," she said, her voice brimming with awe. "And those custom drapes in the dining room, imported from Italy." Gregory nodded, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Took us months to pick the perfect chandelier," he added, leaning back in his chair. His wife chimed in, her bracelets clinking as she gestured. "The walk-in closet alone is bigger than most people's bedrooms," she said, tossing her hair. Mom clapped her hands, delighted. "You two are living the dream," she exclaimed, ignoring my untouched plate. I forced a smile, used to this routine, but then Mom turned to me, her tone shifting to that familiar mix of pity and judgment. "Karen, don't you ever get tired of that tiny apartment? You should see their place. It's a real home." Gregory smirked, and his wife stifled a laugh. I gripped my fork tighter, saying nothing. Aunt Beatrice, sitting across from me, caught my eye. She didn't speak, but her steady gaze felt like a lifeline, urging me to hold my ground. I nodded, slightly grateful for her quiet support. Dad, as usual, stayed out of it, slicing his roast with surgical focus. The table chatter went on, with Mom describing every detail of Gregory's mansion: the granite countertops, the surround sound system, the backyard pergola. "They're hosting a charity gala there next month," she boasted, as if I hadn't organized fundraisers of my own in high school. Then came the bombshell. Mom set down her wine glass, her face serious. "Your grandfather's trust fund," she said, looking at Gregory. "We've decided it's best to pass it all to you and your wife. You're building such a bright future." My stomach dropped. Years ago, Mom had promised that fund, a modest but meaningful inheritance, would be split between me and Gregory. I'd counted on it early in my career, back when I was scraping by to buy my first property. I stared at her, waiting for an explanation, but she avoided my eyes. Gregory leaned forward, all too pleased. "We'll put it to good use, Mom," he said. "Maybe an extension for the guest wing." His wife nodded eagerly. "Or a new deck for summer parties," she added, her voice dripping with entitlement. I felt heat rising in my chest, a mix of betrayal and fury. Aunt Beatrice's hand twitched, like she wanted to say something, but she stayed silent, her eyes still locked on mine. Dad shifted in his seat, his knife scraping the plate, but he didn't look up. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, you said that fund was for both of us," I said, each word deliberate. She waved a hand dismissively. "Karen, you're doing fine in your little apartment. Gregory needs it more. He's got a family to think about." That was the last straw. My whole life I'd swallowed her slights, her favoritism, her refusal to see me. I thought of my properties, my years of hustle, the empire I'd built without a cent from her or Dad. Gregory sat there basking in her praise while his wife planned how to spend money that was supposed to be mine too. I glanced at Aunt Beatrice again, her nod so subtle only I caught it. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm. I wasn't the kid with the forgotten birdhouse anymore. I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let this slide. Mom went back to praising Gregory's vision for the trust fund, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "You should be proud of your brother," she told me, as if I'd done nothing worth noticing. I set my fork down, my hands steady despite the anger coursing through me. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my worth again. Not this time. I'd spent years building something bigger than their mansion, and I was done staying silent. When Mom declared the family trust fund would go to Gregory, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I set my fork down, the sharp clink silencing their chatter. Every head turned. I leaned forward, my voice steady but laced with years of pent-up frustration. Mom, you promised that trust fund was for both of us. But you know what? I don't need it. I own 3 houses right next to Gregory's so-called mansion. They're worth over $2 million. Pick one if you ever want to visit. The room went still, like someone had hit pause. Mom's wineglass froze midair, her eyes wide with disbelief. Gregory's smirk vanished, his face paling as he stared at me dumbfounded. His wife's bracelet stopped clinking, her mouth half open in shock. Aunt Beatrice across the table gave me a look that screamed pride, her lips twitching into a barely concealed smile. Dad's knife hovered over his plate, his eyes meeting mine for the first time all night. I didn't wait for them to recover. The weight of decades of being sidelined poured out, each word deliberate and cutting. Let's talk about fairness. Mom, I said, locking eyes with her. When I was 12, I won first place for my model rocket. You were too busy helping Gregory with fractions he never mastered. In 8th grade, I led the debate team to regionals, and you threw a party for his C in history. In high school, I organized a fundraiser that bought books for kids in need, and you were at his soccer practice cheering for a bench warmer. Every time I achieved something, you looked right through me. Mom's face flushed, her lips parting, but no words came out. I wasn't stopping now. I built my life without a dime from you. I continued, my voice rising slightly. No trust fund, no handouts, just my own work. Those 3 houses, I bought them myself while you were paying for Gregory's wedding and his down payment. I reached into my purse, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table. Property deeds. 2 are next door to Gregory's place, one's across the street. I've been his neighbor for years, and you never even noticed. The folder landed with a soft thud, the sound louder than it should have been in the stunned silence. Gregory grabbed the folder, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. This is fake. He stammered, his voice high and unsteady. You're lying, Karen. His wife leaned over, her eyes scanning the documents, narrowing with suspicion. You live in that tiny apartment. She said, her tone sharp but uncertain. This is some kind of stunt. I smiled, cold and unflinching. That apartment, I rent it to keep things simple. My tenants cover my bills. But you might want to check your own finances. Word is, you're juggling a second mortgage to keep up that lifestyle. Gregory's face drained of color and his wife's jaw tightened, her bravado crumbling. The deeds were real, stamped and notarized, undeniable. Mom found her voice, her tone sharp with indignation. Karen, how dare you speak to your brother like that? He's worked hard for everything. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Worked hard. You paid for his house, his wedding, and now you're handing him Grandpa's trust fund. What did I get? A $50 check for graduating college and a pat on the head. Aunt Beatrice coughed, barely hiding a smirk, her eyes urging me to keep going. I straightened my voice, cutting through the room. I'm done letting you act like I'm nothing. I've built an empire bigger than anything you've given Gregory, and I did it despite your indifference. Then Dad spoke, his voice low but steady, like a dam finally breaking. She's right, Vivian. The room froze again, every head snapping toward him. Mom's eyes blazed, her voice a hiss. Charles, don't you dare. But Dad didn't flinch. You've favored Gregory since they were kids, and it's hurt Karen her whole life. Look at what she's accomplished. She doesn't need your money, but she deserves your respect. His words landed like a thunderbolt, heavy and final. Mom's face twisted with shock and fury, her hands gripping the table. Gregory shifted in his seat, his confidence gone. His wife stared at the floor, her earlier swagger replaced by silence. I stood, pushing my chair back with a scrape. I'm not here to beg for your approval, I said, my eyes sweeping over Mom, Gregory, and his wife. I've spent years proving my worth, and I'm done letting you pretend I don't exist. Gregory, enjoy your mansion. I own the block around it. Mom, keep your trust fund. My legacy is bigger than anything you've handed him. I grabbed my purse, gave Aunt Beatrice a nod, and headed for the door. Mom's voice chased me, shrill and defensive. Karen, you're being ridiculous. But I didn't look back. This wasn't about theatrics. It was about reclaiming what they'd tried to take from me all my life. After my declaration, the atmosphere at the dinner table grew heavier than ever. Mom's face was a mask of indignation, her eyes narrowed as she jabbed a finger in my direction. Karen, you're just showing off? She snapped, her voice dripping with scorn. This is disrespectful, throwing your so-called success in our faces. She didn't apologize, didn't even pause to consider my words. Instead, she doubled down, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. You've always been jealous of Gregory's achievements. Maybe if you'd worked harder, you wouldn't feel the need to make a scene. Gregory jumped in, his voice loud and defensive. Yeah, Karen, what's your problem? We're doing fine without you stirring things up. His face was flushed, his earlier confidence replaced by a desperate need to save face. His wife nodded vigorously, her voice high-pitched with irritation. You think you're better than us because of some houses. Our mansion's the talk of Sioux Falls. She tossed her hair as if that settled it, but her eyes darted nervously to the folder of deeds still sitting on the table. Aunt Beatrice sat quietly, her gaze steady on me, offering silent encouragement. Dad's hands were clenched, but he stayed silent, his moment of courage from earlier seemingly spent. I pushed my chair back, the scrape echoing in the tense room. I'm done with this. I said, my voice calm but unyielding. I've spent my life trying to prove myself to you, Mom, and you've never once seen me. I'm not jealous of Gregory. I've outdone him on my own terms. But I'm done with these dinners, these lectures, this family acting like I don't exist. I grabbed my coat, ignoring Mom's sputtered protests. Keep your trust fund and your praise for Gregory. I don't need either. I gave Aunt Beatrice a final nod, her eyes warm with approval, and walked out the door, clicking shut behind me. Later that evening, I sat in my apartment staring out at the Sioux Falls skyline. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from Dad. Karen, let's talk. He said, his voice heavy with regret. I should have spoken up sooner. I listened, my thumb hovering over the call button, but I didn't press it. His words came too late after years of silence while Mom favored Gregory. I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. I deleted the message and turned off my phone, choosing distance over reconciliation. This wasn't just about one dinner, it was about a lifetime of being pushed aside. The next day, I met Tina at a coffee shop downtown. She'd heard about the dinner from a mutual friend and insisted on seeing me. Karen, you were incredible, she said, her eyes bright with admiration as she leaned across the table. You stood up to them, laid it all out there. That took guts. I managed a small smile, stirring my latte. It felt good, but it's not over. They still don't get it. Tina reached out, squeezing my hand. They don't have to. You know who you are, and that's enough. Keep being that fearless woman I saw last night. Her words warmed me, a rare moment of support that didn't feel like pity. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not for my houses or my bank account, but for my strength. Over the next week, Mom sent texts, each one angrier than the last. You embarrassed us, one read. You owe Gregory an apology, said another. I didn't respond. Gregory posted on social media about their upcoming block party, framing it as a celebration of their success. I scrolled past, unbothered. His wife shared photos of their pool captioned with vague jabs about jealous relatives. I blocked them both. I wasn't playing their game anymore. My properties were thriving, my tenants reliable, and my plans for a new commercial lot were moving forward. My life didn't need their validation. Dad called again a few days later, leaving another voicemail. Karen, I'm proud of you, he said, his voice softer this time. I messed up staying quiet all those years. Please, let's talk. I listened, my chest tightening, but I didn't call back. His support now couldn't erase the years he'd let Mom's favoritism slide. I wasn't closing the door forever, but I needed space to protect what I'd built. Not just my empire, but my sense of self. I deleted the message and focused on my work, my resolve stronger than ever. I made a decision that week: no more family gatherings, no more pretending we were a unit. Mom's refusal to acknowledge her bias, Gregory's need to cling to his image, and his wife's petty jabs showed me they'd never change. Aunt Beatrice sent a text, short and simple. "You did good, kid." It was enough to know she understood. Tina's encouragement lingered too, a reminder that I didn't need my family's approval to move forward. I'd spent years building a life bigger than their expectations, and I wasn't going back to being the invisible daughter. 3 months after that dinner, I got word from Aunt Beatrice. Her text was brief, but it carried weight. Gregory and his wife were in trouble. Their spending had caught up with them and their mansion once the pride of Sioux Falls was on the market. A mutual acquaintance in real estate told her the bank was pushing for foreclosure after they defaulted on their second mortgage. They'd burned through savings, racked up credit card debt, and couldn't keep up with their lavish lifestyle. By the end of the month, they'd sold the house at a loss and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, a far cry from their heated pool and imported drapes. Aunt Beatrice also mentioned Mom and Dad. Their marriage, already strained, had cracked under the weight of my revelations. Dad had confronted Mom about her favoritism, admitting it had torn our family apart. Their arguments grew frequent, spilling over into late-night shouting matches that neighbors overheard. Mom refused to back down, insisting she'd done right by Gregory. Dad, for once, didn't stay silent. He moved out to a small condo near downtown, leaving Mom alone in their suburban house. Aunt Beatrice said he looked tired, burdened by years of enabling Mom's bias without speaking up. Meanwhile, I'd been busy. I'd launched a charitable foundation focused on education, using profits from my properties to fund scholarships for kids from low-income families. The first event was a quiet success, awarding grants to 10 high schoolers for college. I named it the Horizon Fund, a nod to the future I wanted to build for others, not just myself. Standing on a small stage at a community center, I watched those kids' faces light up, their parents teary with gratitude. It felt like the kind of impact Mom never thought I could make. My properties kept generating income, and I was already planning to expand the fund to include mentorship programs. Tina reached out a week after the event, working on a story about local philanthropists for a regional magazine. "Karen, your foundation's making waves," she said over coffee, her notebook open. "People are talking about how you're changing lives." I shrugged, sipping my latte. "It's not about the spotlight. It's about doing something real." She grinned, scribbling notes. "That's why it's a story. You're not just successful. You're making a difference." Her article, published a month later, highlighted my work without mentioning my family. I appreciated that. My achievements stood on their own, not as a jab at Mom or Gregory. Mom tried calling a few times, leaving voicemails that ranged from defensive to pleading. "Karen, we need to talk as a family," one said. Another, "You've made your point now, stop this nonsense." I didn't respond. Gregory sent a single text accusing me of ruining everything with my stunt at the dinner. I blocked his number. His wife's social media posts had shifted from poolside boasts to vague complaints about tough times. I didn't care to engage. My focus was on my life, my tenants, my foundation, my plans for a new commercial property downtown. Their downfall wasn't my goal, but it was a consequence of their choices, and I felt no guilt. 6 months after that dinner, I sat on my apartment's balcony looking out at the Sioux Falls skyline. The city lights stretched out, a reminder of how far I'd come. I thought about that night, the weight of years lifting as I walked away from Mom's table. Cutting ties wasn't easy, but it was freeing. I'd spent my life chasing their approval, only to realize I didn't need it. My success, my foundation, my peace. Those were mine, built without their help or acknowledgement. I was no longer the kid begging for Mom's attention or competing with Gregory's shadow. I was whole on my own terms. Aunt Beatrice sent me an email that week inviting me to join a community outreach project she was spearheading. "You'd be a great fit kid," she wrote. "No family drama, just good work." I smiled, grateful for her support, but I declined to involve myself in anything tied to Mom, Dad, or Gregory. Aunt Beatrice understood, never pushing me to reconcile. Mom and Dad were now officially separated, their marriage a casualty of unspoken truths, finally laid bare. Gregory and his wife were scraping by their apartment, barely covering their debts. Friends mentioned they'd stopped hosting their lavish parties, their social circle shrinking as their money ran dry. Looking back, I saw the cost of Mom's favoritism. It didn't just hurt me, it broke our family. Gregory's reliance on her handouts left him unprepared for reality. Mom's refusal to see me pushed Dad away, leaving her isolated. Their choices built a house of cards, and my truth toppled it. The lesson wasn't just for them, though. I learned that sometimes protecting your worth means walking away, even from family. Cutting ties didn't make me cold. It made me free. I'd built a life bigger than their expectations, and I wasn't going back to being invisible. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself, share your experience in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe for more real stories about finding your strength.